Okay. So the question is, do you think that Adichie hates or dislikes the Kelseys of the world?
I feel like Adichie does have some disdain for the Kelseys of the world, mostly because they're implicitly racist, which is almost as bad as being blatantly racist, except it's more complex than implicit racism because you know exactly what they're thinking. But the Kelseys of the world seem to think that just because they're not the stereotypical racists that go out saying that they hate black people, that they're not racist. And she feels that just because she read one book on Africa that she's educated on the whole of Africa, which is an ignorant generalization, and that's her refusing to acknowledge that there are many different aspects and cultures and just
And
regions,
languages.
and languages and even ethnicities in Africa, and that it's a continent, and she treats it like a country, and kind of in a pitiful way too.
Yeah, it's the pity that strikes me as uncomfortable, that I think Adichie is challenging, that her she's comfortable going and getting the braids and donning the trappings of being African or Africanness, and but then also at the same time pitying from this. It struck me as an arrogant position.
Somewhat of a nationalist. Like, she can criticize America, but if the girls at the salon were to criticize America, then they'd come off as ungrateful, seeing as they immigrated there.
Right, yeah. Let's talk about that immigration experience. Many of her works address immigration, and this particular novel, Americanah, is about Efemelu traveling to America from Nigeria. Can you talk about, what kind of immigration narrative do you think Adichie is tackling here with Americanah?
Well, there are many themes to this. One of them was the tension between blacks in America and Africans. So, because they have a rough history with each other, seeing as slavery was part of one of their histories and not the other. So they treat each other very hostile sometimes because of their differences, and they both blame each other for their own oppression. And so when she goes to the US, she faces a lot of challenges, not only with getting along and trying to understand the black people in the US, but also with trying to find a job and getting used to the culture there. Because back in Nigeria, everyone looked the same, so you didn't have to assimilate if you wanted to find a job.
Right.
But going to the United States, she learned after several back-to-back job rejections that she had to change the way her hair looked, had to change the way she spoke and acted just so that she can get a job.
Get employment, yeah.
And this is something that a lot of immigrants struggle with. So they spend all this time.
Let's let him pass.
Hello, lady. Hey.
Pardon? You know me? I don't remember, I'm sorry. I probably have bought something from you before, yes? Okay, I'm sorry, I don't remember. Okay. We're gonna finish this video and then we'll come back. Yeah. Thank you. Let's go ahead and shift. Let's go ahead and shift to another conversation, because you brought up the topic about Africanness and African Americans.
What is this?
One moment. I'm filming a video with my student.
Yeah. You are a teacher?
I'm a teacher.
What do you teach?
I teach literature, and she is my literature student.
You teach it here?
In Senegal.
At the university?
Pardon me?
As a university?
No. She's a high school student.
Yeah. You living here?
Yeah.
Yeah. You look like Senegalese.
She is Senegalese.
You are Senegalese? What's your ethnic?
No. Tukulóor.
Tukulóor, yeah.
Tukulóor, where's that from?
That's.
Tukulóor sound like, you don't know
I need to
Tukulóor?
educate myself.
Why don't know?
I don't know.
Why don't teach your teacher?
Yeah, why don't you teach me?
I'm like part of Tukulóor and Lebu and something else. I need to educate myself because even I'm not that aware of the regions.
She's Americanah.
Yeah, man, she look like Senegalese, huh? Welcome back. You are.
Welcome. Welcome back. Welcome back.
You been here or just sometime?
I've been here. This is my 4th year here.
Your first time here?
No, for you. For you.
Quatre ans, ça fait 4 ans.
You speak Wolof?
Tout dit.
Right.
We just got the
We should talk about Americanah.
Thank you. See you.
All right. Thank
Now,
you.
if you come again, I'm here. My chef is 50 cents.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right.
My friend tells you, see you go back to Kedugu. You know Kedugu?
Kedugu?
Kedugu, yeah.
Yeah, it's very far. Yeah. No, I haven't been to Kedugu. Have you been?
No, I think I see somebody there. I think you.
Like me, yeah. But we all the brown haired girls, we look the same. All right. Thank you.
Welcome.
So I'm going to talk about their adjustment going back to the country.
Ah, okay,
Do you want
yeah.
me to do that or do you want me to
No,
wait?
I want to talk about that because I think you have something to say about that. Earlier we talked about
And how they had to reinvent themselves.
reinventing themselves, adapting in America, and then going back to
Yeah.
Nigeria. Why didn't she quite fit in there? Can you talk about that?
So when these immigrants go to the United States, for example, they spend a lot of time reinventing themselves so they can fit in and be successful in the United States. So they have to sacrifice their whole culture identity for the sake of their
job.
striving.
Yeah.
A job, survival. So when they go back to their countries have completely changed without them. And so they feel this disconnect and they're stuck in this buffer zone between two different cultures because they spent so much time away from their first culture that they don't know how to fit back in. But at the same time, they spent so much more time getting used to a culture that isn't really theirs. So they feel kind of homeless. How do I? Alienated
Because when she does go home,
and estranged.
the two women that she ends up working with, neither one of them actually treat her like she's Nigerian
Yeah,
anymore.
exactly. And that's another thing too. When they come back and they have the
We
English.
walk right out of the market. Shall we turn around and walk right back in?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
So the thing is, when they do. Oh wait, what was I gonna say? Whew. Yeah,
Fitting in.
fitting in. What was I gonna say?
Fitting in back in Nigeria. Well, because I think, for me, it's part of that narrative, the immigrant story, because she does eventually go back to
yes.
America. She's re-immigrating.
I remember what I was gonna say. Yeah. So when they come back, they already have this culture now that they're used to. Their reinvented selves. You know, the American accent, the American slang, all these other things, and stuff that they're used to, like certain etiquette. So when they come back, and they face a harsh reminder that things are different than, back where they spent so much time trying to change themselves. So, my mind is trailing off.
Yeah, it's the end of the day. We've had a long day. Let's, okay, so one of the questions, we'll move on to the
So they,
fourth
so they
question.
seem very privileged because they have all this, and it kind of comes off as if they're showing off that they were in the U.S. because U.S. is supposed to be, the dream, the American dream.
The land of money.
Yeah, and that's what everyone believes if they haven't lived there. So when they go over there and they come back, they seem. A lot of people feel like they're acting superior to them, which is why they have.
And of course she
resentment.
wasn't. Yeah, she
Yeah.
wasn't. And that's why those two girls, the two women that she works with, are kind of, I don't want to say cruel to her, but there is a certain
Cold.
cattiness, I think.
Curt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
curt. I think so. That's the adjective. Okay, so one of the questions that we talked about previously to this was, hi, ça va? Oh, I have a feeling this is going to be too narrow for us to walk down.
This place?
Do you want to walk down this way anyway? Or do you want to find...
Your choice.
Let's go down that way.
Okay. I don't even know what's down here. This cat's eating good.
Yeah, one of the things that we talked about prior to the interview was what the title Americanah meant. And it was so funny because after all of this time, I'm just now learning what that means. Can you talk about that?
Okay, so Americanah is a term used for people who go to the U.S. and come back with the American culture. So, for example, someone who's lived in Africa their whole life, they go and they come back and they start talking like an American, saying like, yo, what's up, hey fam, like, you know, all this slang and stuff. So they,
Which she never does.
yeah,
and
she doesn't
never
do that.
does that.
But still, even just the accent or the clothes, when they come back, people are like, oh yeah, look at her, Miss Americana, we get it, you went to the US, you know.
So that's
look
where
at you.
Americana comes
Yeah.
from.
So it's not really a friendly term used, but it is a term that is quite often used.
So, okay, I did have another question. It was about the 3 different boyfriends that she had. She had Obinze.
Yep.
I think I'm saying the name correctly.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Obinze, and then she also had Kurt, the white boyfriend, and then and then Blaine,
Yeah,
the
that was
African American. Why do you think Adichie? What do you think she's trying to accomplish there with those? I mean, she does eventually go back to the man she loves, which is Obinze, the African.
I feel like Adichie was trying to show us how. This part's definitely gonna get cut because I gotta remember what I was gonna say. Huh.
Shall we pause here? And we can pause in front of the little
Yeah, let's
tchotchkes
do
here.
that.
Yeah.
I said Adichie was trying to show that
Well,
how
but what is
relationships
your?
are different with people. Okay, yeah. I feel like Adichie was trying to show how relationships are different when it comes to people who look like you and come from the same place as you. So you have that special connection because you both share something important, which is like your culture identity. And then you have people that look like you but may not have the same history, which is Blaine, the African American. They have 2 completely different histories, 2 completely different cultures. And then she brings in race when she ends up with a Caucasian boyfriend, because that also plays a huge role in immigrating to the US and getting to know how race plays a role in everyday life. So having a white boyfriend allowed her to experience how Africans are viewed by white people, but
Yeah.
specifically liberal white people.
Definitely, from that perspective. Would you put Kurt in the same kind of category as maybe the Kelseys of America? Do you think he's any wiser? Do you think Kurt is any wiser about Africa than Kelsey?
I don't feel that Kurt is wiser, but I feel like Kurt knows what he's just a little bit more aware of. Cause okay, so Kurt has spent more time with Ifemelu than Kelsey did, so he learned how to behave. You know, things, what to say, what not to say, and she taught him, you know, hands-on. He had a hands-on experience with how to act around African people, whereas
Is there a way we're supposed to act that we don't normally know?
it's just like certain things like etiquette, like when it comes to hair, because that was a conversation that she had with him. You know, like, oh yeah, I love your natural hair, you know, why don't you wear it like this more often? And then she had to explain to him what it was like trying to get a job while wearing her natural hair and why she had to change it in the first place. So she did enlighten him, but otherwise before, if she had just spent the same amount of time with him as Kelsey, I feel like they would have been at the same starting point.
Okay. Yeah, and that's such an important question because you touch on something that I myself am profoundly ignorant about. You know, I find myself constantly reading these stories about African women writing about hair. It become more and more that is becoming a topic of I don't know if it's fiction mocking the ignorance of so many people or if it's of another form of protest, but certainly she has a blog that's called Happy Kiki Napoli. Remember the blog?
I can't remember what it was called though.
Yeah, something
But it
about,
was a blog about hair.
About hair,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, there's some good stuff there. If you want to read about hair, this is the book to read.
Yeah.
All right. You feel like you've covered enough here?
Oh yeah, something else I wanted to talk about was that in the beginning of the story, when she's first dating Obinze. Obinze has a very liberal mother, because when people think about African parents, they're usually very conservative. They have conservative mindsets, you know, don't have sex until you're married, don't do this, don't do that. You know, you have all these different roles and stuff. But Obinze's mother was very forward with her thinking. Is that
Progressive?
Me insulting others?
No,
I don't wanna
well, no, I
sound-
don't think so, because I think it is a reasonable statement to say, particularly here in Senegal, that it's a Muslim culture and it's predominantly conservative. So to find someone who steps away from that, I think wasn't Obinze's mother the one that sat down with them and,
and talked
had
to
a
them about
frank
safe
conversation
sex and
about
whatnot. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know very many mothers, period,
Who do that?
who do that with
Yeah.
their son and their son's daughters.
Yeah, so we got to see another side of African parents that wasn't stereotypical. Because a lot of parents don't like to touch on the subject of sex. And
Other than
that-
to say don't.
yeah, just don't do it. Or just don't until you're married. So they don't end up knowing how to properly handle situations when you do go south. But Obinze's mother was very forward and she was honest, and she
took the shame out of it.
yeah, she did. She took the shame out of it, and she also made a point that you do need to communicate with your kids. Like, you do need to treat them like other human beings, not just as if you're here and they're below you.
And I feel like that Obinze's mother is the one that breaks that stereotype that the Kelseys and the Kurts fall back on. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, I think it's easy to, I think the popular phrase right now is to say, things aren't monolithic. African culture isn't monolithic. And certainly Obinze's mother demonstrates that. Particularly when you can contrast that with the Kinseys, or the Kelseys, I'm sorry, the Kelseys that go to salons and get, cornrows. Or Bo Derek braids. Okay, I'm not gonna participate in that. All right. Anything else?
This is definitely one of my favorite books. Might be my favorite book. I just really love it because I feel like the tension between Black people in the U.S. and Africans is definitely not something that's often talked about, even though it does play a huge role. Because when you do have, like, when she goes to college, she finds out there's a Black student union and then there's an African student union, and she's so confused as to why they're not together. And that's when she learns it's because, Black people treat Africans like crap, and then Africans treat other Black people like crap too. They just have this.
Well, there's a difference in culture.
Yeah.
Certainly. That's a knot that requires another semester of exploration. Just that question alone. Mm-hmm. But she does begin to tackle it. I'm glad you brought that up. Anyway, that's definitely another reason for ISD readers to read this book.
It is a little chunky, but
it's wonderful. My book club loved it. Yeah. Anyway, come to the ISD library, check it out. Yeah? Are we good?
Yeah.
All right, we're done with this walk and talk. Thank you for listening.
I hope you enjoyed the glow.